Good afternoon. My name is Chris Kerr with the Ignatian Solidarity Network, and we're here today on the 27th anniversary of the Jesuit Martyrs, the deaths of the Jesuit Martyrs in Elba and Lidia Ramos. And we're joined today by Kevin Yonkers-Talz, Trena Yonkers-Talz, and by Lidia Ramirez, who are joining us from the Casa de la Solidaridad, which is based at the Jesuit University in El Salvador, the University of Central America. The Casa is a study abroad program of Santa Clara University, and we have a chance to talk with Kevin and Trena today and Lidia about this anniversary and what it means to us today. And so welcome to Kevin and Lidia and Trena.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. It's wonderful to be with you and try this. This is our first time kind of broadcasting on Facebook Live, so we'll be interested to hear how it goes. So thanks for coordinating this.
Yes, we're talking with folks. Who knows where everyone is, but welcome to all those who are joining us with this live interview. So, this past weekend, the anniversary of the Jesuits was remembered there in San Salvador. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was like there at the UCA?
Fue como muy bonita porque los han mezclado a nosotros también como cocinera a hacer una obra que nunca en mi vida había hecho, aunque tenía muchos años de ir a la UCA, pero solo a la profesión, a la misa, pero ahora como no tenemos estudiantes, tenemos más tiempo de ir como a experimentar otras actividades, ¿verdad?
So first it was really beautiful to go, and we were able to experience different things. So for us as Casa staff and being cooks, we were able to, even though we've gone to the UCA, the activities many, many times, we've never been part of doing the rugs, the alfombras that are made of salt. And so this year, because currently we don't have students here in the Casa, we have a little bit more time, and so we're able to have these kinds of opportunities where we can do things for the first time. And so for us, it was a really beautiful experience to be part of that and experience, the UCA Martyrs and the activities in a different way.
That's great.
Maybe just to share a little bit about, Kevin's sharing some photos right now of what Lydia's talking about.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Some different activities that happen on the day of that we celebrate at the UCA. And we start off in the morning with a soccer tournament. So there are female teams from around the country who are invited to come in, and they have a soccer tournament down at the Foro Deportivo. And then while that's happening simultaneously up by the chapel, like in that street, for those of you who have been to the UCA and been to the chapel in the Montes Romero Center, that street is blocked off. And so during the day, we start at 6:30 in the morning, and we're making rugs out of salt. And we're always incorporate the theme of, each year there's a different theme, like you just have with your conference too. So usually we incorporate that theme into the rugs. And so different departments on campus, we'll do that, different groups of study. This year, the pastoral group from Nicaragua, the UCA Nicaragua and the UCA Guatemala came, and so they did their own rugs as well. And then we are able to usually have like an hour where we get to go home and get a little bit of rest and get a little bit clean, and then we head back down at 5:30. And that is when the procession starts around the campus. And so we spend the whole day making these beautiful rugs. And then we do the procession and we walk over those rugs and destroy them. But it's really it's symbolic of, that we as a people of faith, what we are about is giving it our best and making things, doing our work as carefully as we can, but then in the end, knowing that everything is kind of finite and nothing lasts forever, that it's temporary. So that in itself is a spiritual experience. And then we come back and have a shared mass, and then there's a vigil that lasts about midnight.
Excellent. Hey, Kevin, did you want to show us those pictures? I just
I sent them to you, Chris, in
okay.
your email, but I don't know how to, on Zoom, I don't know how to
if you just
share the...
Yeah, if you just pull them up, pull one up on your screen and click on the green block that says share screen.
Oh, okay. All right, let me try this here. All right.
So what he's sending you right now, the picture, and this is the final product of the rug that we made.
Excellent. There it is. Oh, that's beautiful.
And then in the background, you see 3 people sitting there. Those 2 of them are Romero program students, becari scholarship students that study at the UCA. And Catalina's in the middle. She is a Casa alum who, this year has come down to be part of the first ever de UCA. So it's the Programa Voluntariado de la UCA.
Yeah. And in the green there, it says Verdad y Justicia. Can you, truth and justice. Can you talk about the meaning of that, especially during this kind of unique time in El Salvador's history over the past 6 months or so?
Sí, queremos hablar de ese tema de verdad y justicia en el contexto de El Salvador en los últimos meses. Si quieres reflexionar un poquitito de qué significa ese de verdad y justicia.
Bueno, para mí, supuestamente, que hubiera justicia para pobre Elba y los padres que mataron, y ellos nunca hubo justicia hasta ahorita. No he visto los presos.
So supposedly, like, for me, what it means is really like looking for the truth, because even to this day, like, there really hasn't been justice to hold those accountable who killed the priests and Elba and Selena.
Yeah.
Now you'll see, is there another picture that's just popped up?
Kevin, can you switch the pictures?
Uh-oh. Okay, Kevin is gone for a minute, and he is our techie guy. So
that's right. Well, let me ask you another question about so that you identified those 3 Romero program students who are there. Can you describe the crowd? I mean, is it all people who were alive when the Jesuits and Elba and Selena were killed, or were there young people there who maybe this is not part of their personal history, but their culture, but in a different way, maybe?
Yeah, so it's kind of a different crowd. So during the day, it's pretty much a younger crowd. So people who come in, like I said, mostly students in some departments on campus who will do the rugs. Like I said, a group came from Guatemala, Nicaragua. So it's a pretty young crowd during the day. And then those who participate in a soccer tournament. And then it shifts a little bit. Those who come for the procession and the mass at night, it's a little bit of an older crowd. And I would say maybe half and half. Some people, like people who were here during that time, and then half it's an international group, younger people. Estoy pensando que quizá como mitad en la vigilia, en la misa, que personas que vivían aquí en esa época, y como mitad que son extranjeros o más jóvenes, ¿verdad?
Sí, quizás mitad.
Yeah, so Lidia thinks too. It's probably about in the evenings, about half and half people who participate.
Oh, that's great. And just to welcome folks who are joining us right now, my name is Chris Kerr with the Ignatian Solidarity Network, and we're joined today by Kevin and Trena Yonkers-Talz, as well as Lidia Ramirez, who are joining us from the Jesuit University in San Salvador, El Salvador, the University of Central America. And they're talking about the 27th anniversary of the deaths of the Jesuits and Elba and Selena. And they're showing us some pictures from the events in San Salvador this past weekend commemorating that anniversary. You want to tell us about this picture, Trena?
Are you?
Lidia?
So this is Jose Amando and Erika, and they are first-year students here with us in the Romero program. So they're scholarship students who study at the UCA. They're just finishing up their first year, and both of them are doing really well academically. And actually, the 2 of them were involved in planning the theme of the rug and working on the images. So they're kind of the masterminds behind what you saw, that finished product that you saw just a minute ago.
No, this one's
And in this photo, Merari, who's in the back in the red shirt, she's another one of the first-year scholarship students in the Romero program. Lupita on our right is one of the co-directors of the Romero program, the scholarship program. And Emma on the left is our youngest daughter. So she got in there and had fun mixing the salt. But really, there's part of it at the very end where you get a water bottle and then you spray the salts so it stays wet. But Emma was doing a lot more spraying of people than she was doing on the rug. But she had a blast doing that.
That's great.
Yeah, here, I'll show this one now, too.
Well, tell us about this one.
See.
So I just asked Lidia if she wanted to explain this photo, but I'll keep going. So then what we do, we regather at 5:30 in the evening. It's just starting to get dark. And then we process around, it's about maybe a half-mile loop, the road around the UCA. And so all those rugs, like I said earlier, that we spend time making during the day, we process and walk over them in the evening. And they do it different every year. This year they did kind of like Stations of the Cross, but it was Stations of the Martyrs, and they would stop every so often, have a reflection on a certain martyr and a song, and then we would continue processing. So the palms that you see there, okay, so those are some of the Jesuit martyrs, and those palms continue back with the martyrs and Elba and Selena.
Now I'll do this one, Tree.
Okay, so this is just another close-up image of people who were at the procession.
Beautiful. That's great. Thanks. You know, I wanted to ask. I know Lidia worked with Elba Ramos. I was wondering if she could talk a little bit about Elba and what she remembers of her before she was killed.
Bueno, yo trabajé con Elba desde el 86 hasta que los mataron, ¿verdad? Y ella fue como una persona campesina que le gustaba mucho cortar café y dejaba a los jesuitas para la temporada de café, siempre los dejaba abandonados para ir a cortar porque decía que ella fue como su trabajo favorito, cortar café.
So I worked with her from 1985 until she was assassinated in 89. And she was a very simple woman. She was a farmer from the countryside. And what she really loved to do was to cut coffee. So here during the harvest time, which is like November, December, early January, she would leave the Jesuits. She cooked for them, but she would leave during that time to go do what she loved doing most, and that was cutting coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Y para mí fue como ella la que me enseñó a cocinar de los jesuitas, porque cuando yo vine era como un desastre para cocinar.
Y ahora nada que ver.
Y no podía, entonces ella me decía, a ellos les gusta esto, ellos le voy a enseñar a hacer como esto.
And she's
como mi maestra.
She's the one who taught me everything. She really was my teacher, because when I came to work with the Jesuits, I really didn't know that much about cooking, and it was a disaster. And that's when I kind of leaned over and said, nothing to do with how you cook now. But she was the one who would say, like, look, this is how they like it. This is how you can make this. So she was, for me, she was my teacher.
Kevin, before Lidia goes on, could I ask you to maybe unshare your screen so that we can see you guys while you talk? Okay, perfect. Thanks. Go ahead, Lidia. Sorry. Much better.
Bueno. Sí, también como después estuvimos juntas las tres, y a veces cuando había ordenación, ¿verdad? Dijo una vez el padre Amando, bueno, ahora como que ella puede más la alumna, más que la que estaba enseñando, ¿verdad? Y él dijo, no, sí, los dos hemos aprendido, dice, porque Lidia me enseñó algunas cosas, pero sinceramente Elba fue como una compañera para mí y una gran amiga, porque ella me contó sus sueños, sus cosas de que sentía la presencia de quizás, digo yo, de la muerte de ella, ¿verdad? Porque lo primero que me contó fue que ella soñó que su esposo se había muerto, ¿verdad? Y fue ese sábado que fue 11 de noviembre, que fue el primer día de los vencidos.
So she really, so later on, after we were working together for a while, and when we would, like, sometimes one of the priests, Armando, would say, so really now the student is cooking better than the teacher. And then she would say, well, no, we were both learning, because Lidia taught me a lot, and there was something I could teach her, but she also taught me a lot. But really, she was a very good friend of mine and a lifelong friend. And she would tell me a lot of things and share her dreams with me and share her hopes. And for example, one night, the first day of the offensive that happened here on November 11th, she shared with me a dream that she had that her husband had been killed. And so she would reflect on that with me before her own death.
Sí, también como le digo, los padres querían lo mejor como justicia para todos, ¿verdad? Que tuviéramos una casa. Elba buscaron como un trabajo a su esposo para que ella viviera mejor, porque ella vivía en una champa de lámina en la Delicia, y era como muy grande el espacio donde ella vivía, pero era como un solo, decimos nosotros un solo cajón, ¿verdad? Pero ella, cuando el padre Amando anduvo como rebuscándose para que ella viviera como más mejor, fue que ella también, los padres le buscaron trabajo a su esposo aquí adentro de la UCA.
So because the Jesuits really were about seeking justice in all that they did and working for a better life for people. So Elba, even though she worked for the Jesuits, her husband wasn't working, and so they lived in a community not far from here called Las Delicias. And so she lived in what's called here like a champa, so like a sheet metal house. And we just called it like a big box. So even there was a lot of land where she lived, it really wasn't a house that was acceptable for someone to live in. So what the Jesuits did is they were really committed to their quality of life improving. So they started to look for work for her husband, who was unemployed at the time, work within the UCA.
Chris, maybe I could just add something about Lidia. So she started working with us about 15 years ago, and she's a real integral member of our team at the Casa. And we actually, there was a time when one of the Jesuit houses closed. And so Lidia became kind of like a free agent. And so we quickly moved and we got her on our staff. And to this day, Padre Chema, who was the president of the UCA and the former provincial, still calls her and asks if she'll come back to work for him because she's such a great cook and a great person. So just a little bit about Lidia, who you're hearing from here.
Thank you. And again, for those who are just joining us, welcome. We're here talking with Kevin and Lidia and Trena. They're joining us from the University of Central America in San Salvador, El Salvador. Today is the 27th anniversary of the murders of the 6 Jesuits in Elba and Selena Ramos. And so we're having a chance to learn about about them and their legacy and how it's lived out today. And so, Lidia, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us about Elba?
Pero no terminó porque estaba hablando de trabajo
para el esposo de andaba buscando el trabajo para su esposo, el padre Amando, porque él era vigilante, pero en la calle no tenían como un lugar donde estar, protegidos del agua, de todo. Y el padre Amando dijo que era como muy peligroso porque ya estaba como la guerra, ya estamos en la guerra de la guerrilla y mataban como muchos vigilantes. Entonces el padre Amando, él siempre estaba como pensando en que estuvieran como más protegidos en la UCA, así como le buscó un trabajo a él como de abrir el portón y de ser jardinero de ahí.
So actually her husband, he did have a job, but it was being a night guard in the street, but he didn't have like a place where he was out in the street and there was no even little house for him when he had this job as a night guard. And it was very dangerous at the time because that was when, the war was happening, the heat of the war, and a lot of these night guards who just kind of worked out in the streets like that were killed. And so Padre Armando at the UCA, that's when he found him work at the UCA to be kind of like the doorman for this big door that they had to open that people drove in and out of. And he was also the gardener for them at the UCA.
Sí, y también como cuando Elba fue a vivir allá, fue poco tiempo que vivió porque ya fue como, ellos habían pasado como en mayo o algo así, y en noviembre fue la ofensiva. Y la cosa es que cuando ella subía acá a trabajar, porque no trabajaba adentro de la boca, ella solo enseñaba como jardinero, pero después cuando murió Elba, nosotros siempre íbamos a visitar al esposo de Elba con Reina, con la esposa de Saúl. Íbamos a visitarlos y a cortar los mangos, de ahí a robar los mangos de la boca. Mucho. Entonces él siempre estaba como muy atento. También como cuando llegamos recientemente que se murió Elba, nos contó él que él oyó el montón de balazos, pero que él no pensó que era afuera que estaban tirando balazos, porque era como común de oír eso, ¿verdad? Y que él nunca vio que allá dentro de la UCA había habido la matanza.
So they moved to the UCA in May of 1989, and they were assassinated in November. So they didn't live there for all that long, but that's when they had moved to the UCA to live in this house that they had built, where her husband was the gardener and kind of like the doorman. But Elba actually worked in a different house where the Jesuits lived, so she would travel back and forth. She didn't actually live there. But her husband, so after they were killed, we would go and visit him often right after he was killed to see how he was doing and to visit him. And also it was during the harvesting of the mangoes. We'd always go and steal the mangoes at the Uka too during that time when we'd go and visit him. But he shared that night he was there and he heard all of the firing that had happened, all of the guns that were being fired. But he didn't realize that it was inside the Uka that attack was happening. He thought it was outside, out in the streets.
Pero el padre Chema no sabía que
But Father Chema, who was the provincial at the time, didn't know that we were going to steal mangoes. I think she said, don't share this. This is between us and those who are watching.
Solo llegamos donde porque el esposo el esposo de la Elba se llamaba Don Tulio. Y Don Tulio era como el abuelo de los hijos de la reina. Porque Reina sí vivió con ellos allá en las Delicias, en la Chapa. Ella venía a trabajar con los jesuitas y solo a planchar.
Okay.
Ajá, entonces ella, lo que le quiero decir que me dijo, lo contó a la vez cuando Don Tulio, esa vez, la primera vez que llegamos, que él, como él se había ido a dormir, porque era el primer día que había ido a dormir también ahí adentro de los jesuitas. Porque ellos pensaban que era como más peligroso dormir a la orilla de la calle por las bombas que ponían. Entonces él bajó a dormir a la cocina de los jesuitas.
So what he told the very first time that we went to visit, and there was another woman who went too, her name was Reina, and she was another employee of the Jesuits. At the time, she was employed to iron, and she came from the same community called Las Delicias that Elba and her husband came from. And he really served as like the grandfather figure for Reina's kids because they all came from the same community. So these two women who would go and visit him. And the first time that they visited him, he shared that the night that they were killed, so it was the previous night, it was the first time that they had ever slept inside the residency of the Jesuits. So there was a house where Elba and her husband lived in at the entrance of the Uka, but they felt like it was too dangerous because all the bombs that were exploding in the streets. So they decided that night, the very first night, the only night that they ever did it, Elba and Selena would go sleep in one of the small rooms in the Jesuit residency the night that they were killed. Mm-hmm. Because they thought it was safer.
Sure.
Sí, él nos contó que él había ido, que Elba eran las 7 de la mañana y no llegaba a la casa de él. Y él dijo, bueno, y esta mujer se le pegó la cobija. Porque así dice uno cuando se duerme un poco más tarde. Y voy a ir porque voy a ir a llamarla. Fue cuando ella fue el primero que encontró a todos.
So it was 7 in the morning, and she had come back to the little house that they lived at the entrance of the Uka. And so that's when he said, maybe they have that expression in Spanish, but she must have like slept in because she wasn't up early like she normally was. So then he went down. He's like, well, I'm just going to go wake them up. And then he went down to the Jesuit residency, and he was the first one to discover what had happened and found his wife and his daughter and the 6 Jesuits.
Y fue tan duro para él como ir a avisar al padre Chema, ¿verdad? Porque él fue el que fue a avisarle. Él fue a avisarle al padre Chema que había pasado todo eso y que estaban todos los padres muertos, ¿verdad?
So it was really, he was the one then that went to the Jesuit residency where Chema was living as the provincial at the time, and was the one to inform Chema what had happened and that all of the Jesuits who had been killed. So it was just a really hard experience for him.
Y fue que solo su hijo varón que tenía, porque solo 2 hijos tenía, su hijo fue a Cajutla, que vivía su familia de su mamá, de Elba. Y la muchacha esta, Celina, no quiso ir. Sí. Ella quería estar con su mamá siempre, ¿va? Y fue por eso que ella también tuvo que morir, ¿va?
So they had, at the time, they had 2 children. They had Selena and then a son. The son they sent to live with Elba's mom in Tehuda, so outside of the city. But Selena said she did not want to leave her mom, that she was going to stay and she was going to be with her mom. So she stayed in San Salvador.
Sí, entonces era como, para Don Tulio me dijo que era tan doloroso, tener que ir hasta avisarle y ver todas las personas así, ¿va? Y y don Julio murió también pronto.
So he would share like what a horrible, horrific experience it was for him to be the first one to see that, and then to have to share that news with so many people. And then Julio was just, or Lidia was just saying afterwards that, and then he died not too long after that from sadness.
El hijo vive todavía.
Their son's still alive. Jose is his name.
Pero no sabemos dónde
But we
está.
don't know anything about him. We don't know where he lives or anything. But, you know.
Porque él tuvo la oportunidad de tener su casa, pero él no quería casa, sino que su mamá.
So he had the chance to have the home that they lived in, but he said he didn't want his home. What he wanted was his mom.
Sí.
And again, welcome to those who are just joining us. We're with Kevin and Trena and their colleague Lidia. And Lidia has been sharing the story of the deaths of the 6 Jesuits in Elba and Salina. She was a friend and co-worker of Elba's. And so, Lidia, what do you remember of that day when you found out the news? What was that like for you as a friend of Elba and someone who knew the Jesuits?
Fue dura, pero la cosa es que cuando yo estaba como refugiada, no vi por la tele porque no había luz, no había radio, no me di cuenta. Yo me di cuenta que murieron ellos hasta que vine a trabajar el día lunes, después de la ofensiva.
So honestly, like I didn't know it had happened until I came to work on Monday because it was after the offensive here in the city, and so there were no radio communication, there wasn't television, there wasn't electricity. So I didn't know until I came to work on Monday.
No había teléfono.
And there weren't telephones either.
No. La experiencia fue como tan dura porque primero vine al teologado a buscar a Elba, porque yo estaba en la otra casa que se llama Sultana, ¿verdad? Y lo primero que hice fue venir a buscar a Elba y pregunté dónde los padres. Y Elba no ha venido, porque yo no sabía nada. Y me dijeron los padres, no me dijeron nada.
Pero sabían.
Ellos sí, o sea, ya era un día lunes que ya pasaba ya la ofensiva y todo. Y yo me fui caminando para abajo y la señora que vende tortillas decía allá abajo.
La misma señora.
Esa señora me dijo, niña Lidia, ¿no sabe qué pasó? No. Se murió la niña Elba y se murió la hija de Elba y los padres.
So I came to work on Monday, and I worked in a different house down in La Sultana, de Uca, and Elba worked up here in what was at the time at the Alogado. So I went to the door and I knocked and I was looking for her and said, so is Elba, that's strange, she's not here yet. And everybody in the Alogado, the scholastics knew, but they said, no, she's not here. They didn't want to be the ones to tell her. And so Lidia left and was walking down the street, and there's a woman who actually to this day, she makes tortillas and sells tortillas on the side of the street. She was the one who said, Niña Lidia, don't you know what happened? And Lidia said, no, I don't know what happened. And she said, they killed them. They killed Elba and Salina, and they killed the Jesuits. And that's how she found out, was from the woman selling tortillas on the side of the street.
Sí, porque quizás los padres pensaron porque ellos estaban embarazados de Beatriz y quizás pensaron que yo podía tener, o sea, no pensaron que me podía hacer daño en el momento, como decir, solo, ¿sí?
Sí.
So maybe she's saying that maybe they didn't tell me because I was pregnant with Beatriz, her youngest daughter, and so maybe the Jesuits didn't tell me because they were afraid that it was going to do damage to my pregnancy and that maybe I would just have her right there. So maybe that's why they didn't tell me.
Porque hasta ahora nunca le he preguntado por qué el padre.
Because to this day,
¿Por qué no me dijo en el momento?
she hasn't asked, and to this day, she doesn't know why they didn't tell her in that moment. Why they didn't tell her. She doesn't know.
Por eso yo no pude ni ir al entierro de Elba, porque ellos la enterraron ahí en la Tajutra, a Elba. Y a Celina la fueron a enterrar allá porque ella vivía la familia de él. Pero yo no pude ir, solo fui como a los 9 días.
Porque la enterraron el día domingo.
No, ¿sí?
So she's saying that
Y yo vine el lunes.
she didn't even have the opportunity to go to the funeral of Elba and Salina because it happened on Sunday, and she didn't find out until Monday. But it wasn't until celebrating the 9 days after the novenario that she was able to go and pay her respects to Elba and Salina.
Fuimos a la tumba a los 9 días. Fuimos.
But then at 9 days, we were able to go to the cemetery.
y ella está enterrada allá, pero su familia creo que ya, la mamá murió, el papá murió, solo tenía un hermano y su hijo no había sabido nada.
Yeah, so the rest of her family now has passed away. Her mom and her dad. She had a brother, and her son, but we don't know anything about him.
Pero yo siento como que fue ayer.
I feel like it was yesterday.
Siempre siento como
I always feel
en mi corazón. Siempre, siempre.
in her heart, she feels like it was just yesterday. And I don't know if you can kind of catch the emotion in the screen, but
Yeah. Lidia, thank you so much for sharing that story. You know, and saying it, you feel like it was yesterday. It makes me want to ask how you feel Elba and Selena and the Jesuits are still present today. And, you know, where do you see the spirit or the legacy of those 8 people in the UCA in El Salvador today? Or do you?
Como yo siento que ellos están siempre en mi presencia y yo creo que mucha gente, porque se ve que siempre no se ha olvidado nadie de ellos. Yo quisiera como ir siempre allá donde Elba, porque cada año íbamos antes, pero ahora no sé dónde está la tumba de Elba, porque dicen de que no tienen familia y ella está como muy feo el cementerio. Pero para mí siento que ellos lo siento siempre presentes, igual como que fue ayer.
yeah. So for me, I absolutely feel their presence. I feel like they're always with me, and they're like a lot of people feel that way here, that they are very, very much present in our daily reality. And she's saying that I used to go and visit the two, but it's been a number of years now, and people have said that it's not really been kept up because their families passed away and nobody's even really sure anymore where it is. But it feels like it was yesterday.
Aunque es mucho tiempo, 27 años.
Even though it's been 27 years,
Igual.
but it feels the same. It feels the same.
And Kevin and Trena, for you've been in El Salvador now for many years. You've commemorated the lives of the martyrs. You've shared that story that you came to learn from Salvadorans with many U.S. students and visitors. Where do you experience the legacy, the spirit of these men and women in your experience of El Salvador today?
Okay, I'm going to share another photo here with you, Chris.
Okay.
It kind of gives let's see, share screen. So we showed some of these earlier, but I think, you know, it's in folks like, I mean, you're getting a taste of what our life is like in encountering and becoming friends with folks like Lidia and listening to her testimony. And I think, you know, Trena and I both continue to receive a lot of hope in, as Lidia is saying, kind of like their lives continuing to be lived for justice and solidarity here in Salvador. So, you know, we very much feel like over the last 17 years of working here, animated, kind of connected with their struggle for working for justice, you know, and to connect up with the UCA community and the Jesuits. Today, they continue to, just as the Jesuits did in the past, kind of like using academic reflection and research to get at the reality and the reality of those specifically who are on the margins, and to then publish that and share that. So for me, it's very palpable kind of how the martyrs continue. And then, you know, I was at the teach-in, as you know, and kind of seeing the connection between, and simultaneously when we were praying and listening to Father Greg speak, and simultaneously this was happening with the people processing at the UCA. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just like grace in action, you know? And I think a lot of this can be traced to those early commitments that folks like Ellacuría and Segundo Montes really made. So,
yeah.
Maybe just to share briefly, I think for me, I mean, I think there are many different ways, but just to focus on one is when, Lydia was sharing earlier that at the moment we don't have students, but I think that is for me a time that I see it, and it's like I said, it's very palpable of being able to be that intermediate or the bridge from U.S. young people to the Salvadoran history and the Salvadoran reality, and seeing time and time again, going to the UCA and seeing the rose gardens, going to the Sala de Afiches, or seeing the photo albums, hearing a testimony like Lydia's, and at this time in history, having the privilege of hearing firsthand testimonies and seeing what happens to students and hearing their reflections at night and how they make sense of their faith and how they're making sense of themselves, how they're making sense of who and what they want to be in the world. And oftentimes students will say, and I've even said it myself, that there is something unexplainable that happens. And for me, when I hear someone say that, because it happens, people say that repeatedly, that there's something very profound that happens here. And for me, when I hear that, it's just obvious to me that that is the presence of the martyrs.
And again, for those joining us, we're coming to a close, but we're with Kevin and Trena and their colleague Lidia. We've been talking about the 27th anniversary of the Jesuit Martyrs of El Salvador and their companions Elba and Lidia Ramos, who were murdered at the Jesuit University 27 years ago on November 16th, 1989. They've been sharing some thoughts about this and about how the spirit of the martyrs lives on. And I just, thinking about that, the spirit of the martyrs and how it lives on, I'd just be curious to hear from Lidia some hopes for El Salvador moving into the future. El Salvador has been in the news a lot. There's been a lot of information about the situation there and the ways that violence has challenged the society. What are hopes you have for your country at this stage right now?
Tengo mucha esperanza de que el mundo, o sea, los jóvenes más que todo, cambien su forma de ser, ¿verdad? Y que yo digo que pidiéndole a Dios y también cambiando la vida de nuestros hijos, que a veces nosotros le damos como la pausa de que sean a veces vagos o a veces, no sé, pero ahora está como, yo tengo esperanza de que primero Dios algún día cambie este Salvador y siento que es en todo el mundo, no es solo aquí en El Salvador.
So I have hope for El Salvador that things will change, and that more than anything really that our youth and our children will change. Sometimes it's hard because it's a hard time in our history, but really believing that it can be different here, and but it's not just here in El Salvador. It's really like the whole world. So I have hope that the world can be better than it is.
Yeah.
This is the hope.
Thank you. And there's Kevin. And Kevin and Trena, is there anything else you'd like to share about El Salvador from your perspective as companions with Salvadorans, that for your hopes for the country or your hopes for the future of your work there? I don't want to make this political, but I do think that now more than ever, we need to provide people the opportunity to be exposed to realities like El Salvador. Not that it only can happen here, but Lidia talked about the young people, and that for me is certainly where I find hope in our students, in our four daughters, and the Salvadorans whom we know in the communities. And so my hope is absolutely that the work of the Casa and works of Casa-like programs continue, because I really think that, like Lidia said, it's not just here in El Salvador where we need hope and we need changes. We need them everywhere. But I think without that direct contact with the other, and I know Greg Boyle spoke, and he spoke about kinship and mutuality and friendship. But I think without that, life and our perspectives become very small and become very insular. And so that is my hope, is that we can continue to have students who come here and are transformed
not by us, not by the Casa de Uca, but by the Salvadoran reality, and that they take that with them, and wherever they choose to be, they can make a difference and be that hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Just in closing, Chris, that having opportunities to encounter those on the margins is just fundamental. I remember Dean Brackley, who was a Jesuit who, after the Jesuits were killed, was one of the guys to come down here and continue the work of the martyrs, always talked about the importance of having contact with that direct reality. And that's one of the real gifts, I think, of Jesuit higher education, is that we are providing linkages for our students. And not only just students, there are a lot of faculty groups that come down here in places like Nicaragua and different, but I think that for me, that within Jesuit higher education, that we're providing those types of opportunities for faculty, staff, and students is just essential, because it just helps us understand more about what the reality of the world is like. And then that direct contact with folks can then inspire our next actions and, influence our vocational discernment, influence our research, influence our scholarship. So, so maybe this is great. I'm wondering how it went, though. I'd be interested to hear if anybody was watching out there, how the experience was, because this is kind of like a new thing for us.
I know, it's very exciting. We'll get to find out soon. We'll be able to look at that. But I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you. Gracias to Lidia for sharing those very personal stories about coming to know, knowing Elba and the loss of Elba and the other 7. For being with us on this special anniversary, to be in contact with someone who came to know the martyrs is very, I think, very special for people here in the States. As Kevin mentioned, we gathered this past weekend for the Ignatian Family Teaching for Justice in Washington, D.C. Over 2,000 people were there, and we remembered in prayer the martyrs, Elba and Selena, and the 6 Jesuits, and so please know that there are many people in the United States who continue to pray with you, to be in solidarity with you. And Kevin and Trena, we're grateful for your work and for being with us today and for bringing Lidia to share with us as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this special way of honoring and commemorating the 27th anniversary of the Jesuit Martyrs of El Salvador.